On this Saturday night, the Poilievre pivot.
We need a prime minister who will put Canada first.
New slogan and new opponents. But can he hold on to his lead in the polls?
It's another shtick by a guy whose message is failing to resonate.
The next chapter in a heated face-off.
The biggest game of the century.
How brewing political tensions are fueling one of hockey's biggest rivalries. Also tonight, Ukraine's leader calls for a united Europe.
I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
Could a European army be in the cards? And healing through sport.
From the day that I found out that I was accepted, it kind of pulled me a little bit forward instead of backwards.
Servicemen and women compete and inspire in the 7th Invictus Games.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Hundreds of people piled into a convention hall in Ottawa today to hear opposition leader Pierre Poilievre lay out his party's new focus. Putting Canada first is his main promise, a pivot in messaging in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated threats against Canada. The change also comes as the Liberals are surging in the polls, threatening the Conservatives' once monumental lead. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, has tonight's top story.
Are there any patriots in the room who are ready to put Canada first?
With the Liberals creeping closer to them in the polls, and with the U.S. president musing daily about swallowing Canada, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are wrapping themselves in the flag.
Sometimes it does take a threat to remind us what we have, what we could lose, and what we could become.
Poilievre delivered a 75-minute speech at what the party called a Canada First rally. There were no new policy announcements, but a heavy focus on one new line.
We need a prime minister who will put Canada first. My Canada First plan, part one of our Canada First plan, to put Canada first.
Poilievre would meet the Trump threat with a tariff-for-tariff response, with more defense spending, and by diversifying Canada's economy. But many Liberals and many provincial premiers have said the same thing. Every Canadian politician these days is concerned about Trump. But Conservative politicians are increasingly concerned about Mark Carney, and the Conservatives are addressing that with new attacks.
We're going to take other countries' jobs.
That TV ad debuted this weekend, but the Liberals had an immediate response with a pair of their own attack ads.
Everything is broken.
Everything is broken.
A Liberal cabinet minister, also a Mark Carney supporter, was dispatched to reinforce that message.
I'm highly skeptical of what this guy has said. He said Canada's broken, Canada's broken, Canada's broken. You can't at the same time say that Canada's the best country in the world.
Miller and the Liberals were also dismissive of Poilievre's new bid to become Captain Canada.
I think it's another shtick by a guy whose message is failing to resonate.
So both the Liberals and Conservatives are using Trump to escalate their own electoral contest, but both are largely united in how best to respond to the U.S. president. Carolyn.
David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. Millions of Canadians are facing fierce winter conditions this weekend. Environment Canada has issued weather warnings for vast swaths of the country. In southern Ontario and some parts of Quebec, another major winter storm is bearing down on the region tonight and into tomorrow. Between 25 to 40 centimeters of snow is expected in some areas, including Toronto and Ottawa. In the prairies, extreme cold warnings continue, with wind chill values dipping to minus 45. Well, the ominous weather warnings haven't stopped Montreal hockey fans from showing up to what could be a fiery matchup on the ice tonight. Team Canada is up against Team USA as part of the NHL's Four Nations Face-Off tournament. But with tensions between our two countries at an all-time high, politics and the puck are colliding. Mike Armstrong reports.
The festivities outside the Bell Centre on this day were free. The tickets for tonight's game were not. The worst seats for Canada versus the U.S., way in the back in a corner, were going for Saturday morning close to $700.
The biggest game of the century, man.
People are saying the biggest game of the century. You know, you can't get much bigger than Canada-U.S., right?
Now, going into this tournament, there were doubters. It's short, barely a week and a half, and Canada's biggest traditional hockey rival, Russia, isn't here. It felt like it could be closer to an all-star game than an Olympics. What fans have found instead is a rather unexpected and welcome degree of intensity.
Oh, he was lined up like a check.
Good hockey, people are trying.
But hockey players are the best, they care about it.
It's going to be a battle. Definitely going to be a battle, looking forward to it.
Best on best, Canada versus USA. Bell Center Saturday night. I don't think it gets much better than this.
This is best on best, the top players in each country. It's the first time that's happened internationally since the 2014 Olympics.
You've got Connor McDavid, believe it or not, who's the best hockey player in the world. He's in his mid-20s already. He's never played international hockey. So, like other sports, play internationally all the time.
What this tournament seems to have going for it is that players are buying in, playing for pride and their country.
It's going to be the biggest game that I've ever played in my career, so I'm really looking forward to that, and just, yeah, there's a big build-up to it.
The last two times these teams squared off at the Olympics, Carey Price was in goal for Canada. That this tournament has turned out to be tough isn't surprising him.
You don't get these opportunities very often, especially to play Team Canada versus Team USA, so you know, I'm sure both of those teams are going to come out flying tonight.
Now, on top of the regular rivalry, this time there is also politics, with the U.S. President starting a tariff war, saying he wants to annex Canada, and calling the Prime Minister on every occasion Governor Trudeau. Some fans have been booing the American anthem. Players have said politics don't belong in sports. But one American journalist covering the event says he's spoken to a Team USA player anonymously who says he understands why it's happening. Considering the threats and the disrespect, if it was happening to the U.S., he says we'd probably be seeing worse than just booing an anthem. Carolyn?
Mike Armstrong in Montreal, thank you. Canada's federal tax holiday comes to an end at midnight, with a debate now growing over just how effective it was. The initiative was pitched back in December as a way to give Canadians some relief on a wide array of items. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business says only 5% of small businesses saw an uptick in sales, and many were saddled with extra administrative work to implement the measure. Some industry groups, like Restaurants Canada, are pushing for the exemption to be made permanent, arguing it would provide long-term relief for the struggling industry. Hundreds of demonstrators took to the streets of Montreal this afternoon, delivering loud calls for both the government and consumers to boycott Amazon. Leading the charge were unionized workers who recently lost their jobs when the multinational abruptly pulled out of Quebec. They say they're still in shock 1 month after they found out Amazon was closing all 7 of its Quebec facilities, laying off thousands. Amazon has been accused of pulling out of the province because of unionization efforts at a Laval facility, claims the company has denied. European leaders revealed late today they will hold an emergency summit on Russia's war in Ukraine. This as concerns grow over President Trump's push to secure a peace deal with Vladimir Putin. His Ukraine envoy said Europe would be consulted but not take part in any talks between the U.S. and Russia over ending the war. As Vincent McAviney reports, the developments have now sparked calls for the creation of a European army.
With a wide-ranging rebuke of Europe from U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance still ringing in their ears, the continent's leaders gathered for the second day of the Munich Security Conference. Taking centre stage, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky struck a friendlier tone, but had a stark warning.
Many leaders have talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe. I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
With admission to NATO now unlikely, but EU membership still possible, Zelensky made his pitch.
Without Ukraine's army, Europe's armies will not be enough to stop Russia. It's reality for today. Only our army in Europe has real, modern battlefield experience.
The idea of a European army has been debated for decades, but questions over how it would operate and the command structure have never been fully resolved. After meeting US counterpart Marco Rubio, Canada's foreign minister had this to say on the prospect of Ukrainian peace talks.
there was a clear understanding that we need to make sure that Ukrainian voices are at the table, that Europe and Canada is at the table, because ultimately it is also about Ukraine's security, but it's also about the Euro-Atlantic security.
Vance departed last night, and today several European leaders criticised his attacks on the health of European democracies and his meeting with the leader of Germany's far-right AfD party. But the new boss of NATO, former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, is clear the Trump administration's insistence on boosting defence spending is right.
There is an absolute commitment of the US, including this administration, to NATO, but also an expectation that on the European side we have to step up, we have to spend more, and they're right. We are not spending enough.
G7 foreign ministers will meet in Quebec next month. Those fighting on the front lines in Ukraine will be hoping for more unified international support after a week of mixed signals from the new Trump administration. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Still in Munich, a mother and her 2-year-old daughter have died in hospital after a car plowed into a crowd of people during a trade union rally on the eve of that security summit. The driver, a 24-year-old asylum seeker from Afghanistan, was arrested. Officials say he appeared to have religious motivations. When it comes to national security, Canada relies on help from a network of allies in order to tackle threats. But what will happen now that its largest and most powerful ally, the U.S., is burning bridges? Our Mercedes Stevenson has been looking into what it means for the intelligence community, and she joins us now from Ottawa with more. Mercedes.
Carolyn, as the U.S. government strikes out on a dramatically different path when it comes to allies and international security, concerns have been growing about what the changes in the national security establishment in the U.S. could mean for global stability and intelligence sharing. America has the largest, most sophisticated, and most robust intelligence capabilities of any country in the world. This week on the West Block, one of the former top officials at Canada's spy agency, CSIS, joins us, and he warns that the speed and depth of the changes underway could put the United States at risk for a catastrophic attack.
Trump is degrading the efficiency of the U.S. intelligence community, breaking up the FBI, buyouts, the CIA, other agencies as well. And that is basically positioning the United States for another 9/11. And by extension, Canada's vulnerable.
Stanton also shares some alarming thoughts on how far the Trump administration might be willing to go in the pursuit of tariffs, and warns that Canada could become a target of U.S. intelligence collection instead of a protected ally who is sharing it. Carolyn?
Mercedes Stevenson, thank you. And you can watch Mercedes' full conversation with Dan Stanton tomorrow morning on the West Block, right here on Global. The mud after the storm. Coming up, Californians cleaning up after landslides and an atmospheric river of rain. Plus, how a wider threat of violence has Canadians on the move in Africa. In the U.S., residents in Southern California are recovering after flash floods and mudslides inundated the region this week. It happened just weeks after devastating wildfires tore through several communities. Now, many of the same areas are having to deal with this latest storm. Candace Cole reports.
This harrowing dash cam video captures the moment as mud rushes onto the Pacific Coast Highway, the driver just narrowly escaping. This is the aftermath of heavy rains that saturated Southern California, caused by an atmospheric river. The storm resulted in flash flooding and mudslides in areas around Los Angeles, including Malibu and Pasadena, which are still recovering from last month's wildfires that killed 29 people and left tens of thousands of residents without a home.
It's just unbelievable. Just so much devastation, and now we have the mudslides on top of that. So it's just surprising.
Some of Southern California's slopes recorded up to 150 millimeters of rain Thursday. This time-lapse video from UC San Diego shows the buildup of mud and debris following the heavy rainfall in Sierra Madre, an area just east of LA. Now, cleanup efforts are underway as residents who thought they were prepared grapple with the reality they now face.
Thought we knew what to expect. We put the mud fence up. We tried to be prepared.
but this was just way, way too much.
Officials say preparing ahead of time prevented a bad situation from becoming even worse for the residents here.
We were able to take out 2,500 truckloads of debris in advance of this storm in order to prepare. Had we not done that, the damage would have been dramatically more significant.
Candace Cole, Global News, Washington.
Ahead, the latest dramatic exchange of hostages for prisoners in Israel and Gaza. Hamas released 3 more Israeli hostages today as part of the fragile ceasefire deal. The 3 men appeared in good health compared with those released last week. They were handed over to the Red Cross in Khan Yunis in exchange for 360 Palestinians who were held in Israeli prisons. It is the 6th swap under the 6-week truce that was reached in late January. The deal expires in early March. Neither Israel nor Hamas has agreed on terms to extend it. Israel says 70 hostages are still being held by Hamas, although it believes only 35 are still alive. And President Trump weighed in earlier this week saying if Hamas doesn't release all remaining hostages by noon Saturday, that all hell will break loose and Israel was free to renew the fighting in Gaza. And just today, President Trump added the United States will back the decision Israel makes. The UN is warning of the possibility of a regional war in Central Africa as violence spreads in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A Rwandan-backed rebel group called M23 advanced to the outskirts of several major cities this week in eastern Congo. There are reports of widespread looting and prisons being emptied. Canada has moved its contingent of 7 peacekeepers to the safety of neighboring Uganda. At an African summit, the UN Secretary General called for neighboring nations to stop stoking the conflict.
There is no military solution. The deadlock must end, the dialogue must begin, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC must be respected.
It really requires strong pressure on the Rwandan government, and the pressure should come from the United States. That's what's happened in the past.
Walter Doran says Canada has a key role in the UN mission, helping oversee operations. And even though our staff have left the country, it's important that other UN observers remain to be the eyes and ears of the international community and to save as many people as possible. Next, recovering through sport. The inspiring stories of the athletes competing in the 7th Invictus Games in BC. The Invictus Games are wrapping up in Vancouver and Whistler tomorrow, a unique sporting event for service members and veterans who have been wounded or injured. Through sport and community, these competitors are finding a path to recovery. Our Neethu Garcha met with 2 members from Team Canada who are inspiring others to face their challenges head on.
For many military service members, the road to recovery isn't easy. For Sergeant Rufka Hanna, it was the Invictus Games that provided her with a life-changing opportunity.
From the day that I found out that I was accepted to the Games, it kind of pulled me a little bit forward instead of backward all the time. I've served in Afghanistan. I served in Bosnia. I spent 4 years working at the embassy in Moscow, Russia. I pushed through all those years and all those things that I did because I was proud to serve my country in the best way that I could.
Now, nearly 24 years into her service, Hannah has faced physical injuries, post-traumatic stress disorder, and she struggled with her sense of purpose.
I'm originally from Lebanon, so I got harassed about that. There was a lot of sexual harassment. Sorry. Didn't know why. Why I was still alive, I guess.
The Games gave Hannah the support of a team who understood what she was going through, a team that helped her push forward when she thought she couldn't.
Good.
For Captain Kate Shields, the Games have given her the chance to overcome more than physical challenges.
Well, I've served both as an armored officer and a registered nurse in trades that I was in at the time through sexual harassment. And for myself, over the last few years, I've struggled with diagnosis of OSI, so an operational stress injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
As both women prepare to retire from service later this year, they're moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose. For Shields, a new journey awaits in her life beyond the Games.
I have another child coming.
Oh my goodness, congratulations.
Thank you. Once these games are done, I will be busy.
Their story serving as a reminder that even after injury, emotional scars and trauma, recovery is possible, and the journey to it is a shared one. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Today is Flag Day across Canada, celebrating the 60th anniversary of our national flag. So tonight's Your Canada is a flag being skated down the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, marking a major milestone for one of Canada's most cherished symbols. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.